Spirit team, what subject are we covering this week? 284 Green Street, Enfield, in North London, is the site of Britain's best documented poltergeist haunting. For 18 months, starting in the summer of 1977, Peggy Hodgson, her children, and over 30 eyewitnesses, including neighbours, psychic researchers, journalists, and even the local lollipop lady, saw and heard moving furniture, flying objects, unexplained knocking noises, and levitation. The activity was centred on the daughters, Janet and Margaret Hodgson, with 11-year-old Janet acting as a conduit for a mysterious, gruff voice. I asked my spirit team about this haunting and try and find out what's real and what's not. I have strengthened my protection as much as possible before this session, for obvious reasons. Did the Hodgson family really experience a poltergeist in their home in Enfield in 1977? Is it true that poltergeist activity is mostly found in places where children are going through puberty? Why is this? Does puberty create a change in energy that attracts them? Janet described what it felt like to channel Bill. When the voice of Bill Wilkins came out of my mouth, it felt like it was coming from behind me rather than from within me, she said. At one point, Maurice Grosse taped my mouth up and filled it with water, and the voice still came.
Is anybody there?
No.
Who's there?
Doctor
Doctor Who?
Goose chases here.
Some people thought Janet was putting on a voice and it wasn't really the poltergeist speaking through her. Can you tell us whether the voice coming through Janet at the time really was Bill, or did Janet fake it somehow? Do not bring Bill through. Just use your viewer to research this, please. The night of 31st of August 1977, Peggy Hodgson entered her children's bedroom and found the dressing table moving across the room. In a recorded interview, she recalls what happened. I just couldn't believe it. In fact, I pushed it back twice, and a third time I couldn't move it. This event was accompanied by repeated knocking noises, so Peggy went to fetch her neighbour. The neighbour, Vic Nottingham, also couldn't explain what he witnessed. I heard the knocking as I walked in the front door. I went all over the house, just couldn't make out what it was. So in the end I thought, there's only one thing. I'll call the police. WPC Caroline Heaps was first on the scene and described seeing a chair sliding across the room. It came off the floor, maybe a half-inch I should say, and I saw it slide off to the right about 3.5 to 4 feet before it came to rest. With the police at a loss for what to do, the newspaper, the Daily Mirror, was called. Photojournalist Graham Maurice was sent to the Hodgson's house on an assignment that he now describes as life-changing. It was clear that the activity was occurring when the children were there. Maurice stood in the gloom in the kitchen, and one by one they brought the children in, asleep in adults' arms. The last one to come in was Janet. Suddenly things just took off, and just started flying around the room. I got hit by a Lego brick over my right eye. He was convinced the objects weren't being thrown. He moved to the corner of the room to have a clear view of every person there. None of them were doing anything. Graham also describes a sequence of photos that he took at the time of Janet levitating, although he wasn't actually present in the room with the camera. In the photo, Janet looks to have come up from a prone position, flying across the room, and she's in mid-air. Skeptics have said that she could have easily used the bed as a trampoline and launched herself off the bed. Maurice Grosse from the Society for Psychical Research was the examiner leading the investigation. In an interview at the time, he explained what he saw. "I have actually seen myself marbles being thrown about. I've seen the door moving without any help. I've also experienced a reduction in room temperature." In early November 1977, Grosse confronted the presence in the living room. "As I asked the question, 'Are you having a game with me?' it threw the cardboard box and the pillow right in my face." The psychic researcher Maurice Grosse brought in some of his family members to investigate and report on the activity in the home. Was that an innocent move, or were they collaborating together to make more of the story than it was? Members of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, including stage magicians such as Milbourne Christopher and Joe Nickel, criticised paranormal investigators for being credulous while also identifying features of the case as being indicative of a hoax. American magician Milbourne Christopher briefly investigated and failed to observe anything that could be called paranormal, and was dismayed by what he felt was suspicious activity on the part of Janet. Christopher would later conclude that the poltergeist was nothing more than the antics of a little girl who wanted to cause trouble and who was very, very clever. Ventriloquist Ray Allen visited the house and concluded that Janet's male voices were simply vocal tricks. A 2016 article by psychology professor Chris French on Time Out described 5 reasons why he believed the case to have been a hoax, one of which was the 2 sisters involved admitting hoaxing some of the activity. Did Janet fake any of the supposed poltergeist activity? If she did, which parts did she fake? What about her sister Margaret? Did she fake any activity that happened there? The BBC radio reporter Ros Morris covered the story at the time for BBC Radio. It wasn't long before she joined Maurice Grosse for a nighttime vigil, while the family was asleep. After the girls went to bed, there was a very loud crash upstairs in their bedroom. Maurice went upstairs, and it appeared something had moved a chair across the room, a distance of about 9 feet. She felt this would have been impossible for the girls to do, as they were actually in bed. She said at the time, "Something chucked the chair across the room. I'm convinced of that." Richard Grosse is the son of investigator Maurice Grosse. As a newly qualified solicitor, he helped his father interrogate the Enfield Poltergeist, and as such is probably the only member of the Law Society to have cross-examined a ghost. Grosse recalls how every breakfast time my father would play a tape or two. It started off with noises, bangings, then it moved on to banging in response to questions.
Indeed.
Knock 1 for no and 2 for yes. Are you a male spirit? 1 for no and 2 for yes.
2.
That's 2. You are a male spirit. Did you used to live in this house? You did. Was it more than 50 years ago? Yes. Did you die in this house? Did you pass on? You did pass on in his house. Now, why are you here? Are you unhappy? You're not unhappy. But why are you here? Is it because you want to give us a special message? No. You don't want to give us a special message. Are you having a game with me? Oh, right.
Oh, gross.
If Janet was faking it, how did Janet know the details of how the man died in the house, and spoke the details of how he died in her gruff voice, which were later confirmed by Terry, Bill's son? Peggy, Janet and Margaret's mother, has passed now. She died in 2003. Up until that time, she continued to live there, although the activity had ceased. If she had been so scared, why did she continue to live the rest of her life there? Why didn't Terry, Bill's son, go to the home and speak to his departed father and tell him to move on? Or did he not believe it was happening, even though he confirmed the details of his dad's death exactly as spoken through Janet? As a result of what some thought was a possession and others thought were behavioural issues, Janet was brought for testing and admittance to a psychiatric hospital. Of course, no one knew whether Janet was truly afflicted or was affected by other psychological issues. Whichever is the case, it's said that Janet Hodgson was threatened with shock treatment, which was still widely used at that time. These reports say that when this threat was made, Janet admitted to making up the Enfield haunting. However, as an adult, she said it was true, and she only made up 2% of the activity herself. That said, Janet and her family returned to the Enfield haunting house, and only one report of paranormal activity has been made since. In fact, Peggy Hodgson died in that home in 2003, almost 25 years after the Enfield haunting. Despite having reported being terrorised by a ghost, Janet also stayed on in the house until she was 16 years old. The one report which was made was coincidentally by the son of a single mother to 4 children, the Bennets. They didn't stay at the Enfield haunting location long. They were only there a few months. But the 15-year-old reported having seen a ghost standing in his room one night. There were no other witnesses and there was no other activity. Do not bring Bill through, please. Just use your viewer to research the answer. Why did Bill want to frighten the family? Did he still think the home was his? There is a new family in that house now that have lived there some time. They report they haven't noticed any activity. Again, don't bring him through, just use your viewer if you need to research. But did Bill get bored and move on in the spirit world? I hope he's now at peace and in the right place. So was there an element of truth? Or was the whole thing made up? You decide.